Let's talk about visual weight. One of the most important elements of composition framing, in my opinion, is visual weight, and understanding the visual weight is the key to perfecting composition and actually feeling the composition. Because when you're composing images, okay, it's like speaking a language. It's the best analogy I can find. So let's say you're learning a language and you can't really say you're fluent until you start thinking in that language. So when your composition skills gonna achieve the level where you are intuitive with it, that's where you start getting what it's all about. And visual weight is kind of like a thing that you need to feel, because you can't really weight things on a scale. You need to weight them in your in your soul. You know what I mean? Like you need to feel it. So elements in image have different weight, and it's usually based on contrast, saturation, sharpness, color, and brightness, etc. So let's say that in this image, if you're going to take this image for example, we have several visual anchors and they have a different visual weight to them. So for example, very powerful anchor is going to be this human, and also this one, even though it's barely visible, because we as people going to always recognize humans' faces in the image. If you're going to see an image of, let's say, a trash can, which has like, two eyes and a kind of like a mouth, you will see a face over there immediately, because we are drawn to these shapes instantly, instinctively, okay? So human silhouettes or human figures, even though very, very small, they're going to be exceptionally powerful in your composition. So they're going to be very strong visual anchors. They're going to have a lot of visual weight to them, okay? Now, another visual weight is going to be colors. Like, for example, this kind of a slightly saturated, kind of a cyanish bluish thing. All these yellow anchors here, they're tiny, but you can see them because they're saturated, okay? They're tiny, but you can see them. And if you start recognizing these elements, you will see how eye is being led and how this image is being framed and lead you into this main feature, which is this, leg. Even this guy here, which is walking, and he's a powerful anchor, is not that contrasty. So even though it's a heavy weight, I try to reduce the weight by kind of making him a little bit, melding with the background in terms of color and saturation. But because he's facing inside of an image, it's going to bounce you back into that, central image, which, by the way, it's offset to the left. It's not in the middle, okay? So you see now, you can use visual anchors to move you around the image. And in previous video, we talked about leading lines. That's going to be one of them. There's going to be another one here and another one here. And you're going to have implicit leading lines, okay? For example, between the human and this robot, that's the implicit line. And so on and so forth. And then you got implicit lines created by lights, by these beams of lights, because they point in a certain direction. So these lights are beaming inside of the image, okay? So, see the cone beams inside. That's the implicit leading line. And then you got these lines here leading you down, to this leg again. So this is a very strong focal point, which is why I didn't want this human to appear too strong, because it will be too strong of a visual weight. Makes sense? And now it's a lot to take in, but you need to start thinking differently when you're thinking about images, okay? Stop thinking about what you're seeing in terms of like a Mac, a bot, or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's all visual weight. You need to think like these guys in Matrix. You don't see code anymore, right? You just see blondes, brunettes, and all that stuff. Do you know what I mean? So think in terms of weight. Then, of course, contrasty weight to all these lights and everything which frame the image, right? But I needed to balance them. So for example, if, I take this robot, which is kind of heavy, I need to balance it with something. If I'm going to grab a light here in a corner, I need to balance with another light here and here. And you got this beautiful round frame, again, framing this main feature which is this, this Mac, right? This Mac leg. And then, for example, very strong visual anchor is going to be warm lights. You got to be very careful with warm lights. There's another example on my ArtStation which I want to show you, and it will, let me just download this image very quickly. It's kind of a good example on balancing lights and how you can use lights to guide eyes through the image. So this is one of my recent renders. You can see there are a lot of lights here, right? All around the scene, even this one here, the tiny one, this one here in the front, this one, and this one here in the leg. and this one here, and they all going to be framing this vessel around. You see what I mean? So all these lights are essential to the composition, but they're gonna be creating anchors. Like this is one anchor, this is second anchor, this is third anchor, you know, that's another one, and here, and you got all the entire vessel, you got it framed. So visual anchors could be, and visual weight can be, you know, can be a very small element, but can have a very strong visual weight. Like for example, this light here is tiny, but because it's warm and saturated, it's a strong visual weight. So if you're gonna make this light huge like this will ruin the image, okay? Because it's just going to be a massive pull. You'll be able to, you know, see this and nothing else. That's how strong it's gonna be. So when you're composing your image, you need to balance all the elements according to weight. Now you're not trying to create an equilibrium, because you're not going for a perfect balance. You're going for a balance that's slightly offset. Think about it. When you make a cake, you put a little bit of salt into it to break the taste. If you make some salty dish, like for example soup, you put a bit of sugar or honey into it to break the taste. That's how you cook. And the same with a dessert, like, you know, after dinner you eat a dessert because you want to break the taste. Do you see what I mean? The same with images, okay? You need to know how to break the taste. So when you create a dish, which is a composition, then you break the taste with the tiny elements. They're gonna offset the balance and sort of notch this, again, this peaceful face of water on a lake and create ripples. Do you see what I mean? Because perfection is boring, right? Imperfection, that's what's fascinating. That's why human faces are asymmetrical. That's why you cannot find straight lines in nature. It just doesn't exist. The perfect angles, they don't exist in nature. It's all man-made. That's why nature is so beautiful, because it's perfect in its imperfection. And you need to aspire to nature in creating your images. So seeking perfection in perfection. So when you have the perfect composition, break it. And that's how you're going to achieve mastery, because breaking the rules, that's the key. So when you find this perfect balance, you know, in a composition, try to break it, try to pull a bit more weight to the front, right? Offset it with some human on the left, and this, for example, element here. Put more details here than, for example, in this area, right? Create a pass through that composition by creating really strong anchor by, you know, putting two humans, and so on and so forth. And again, using elements in your image that have a different weight, you can sort of manipulate, kind of fine-tune this engine of composition, and, you know, create an image that's really powerful and really striking. And it takes years, guys, okay? You know, it's not gonna happen in one day, but I want you to be aware of this and conscious of it when you create an image. Creating a composition needs to be something that you think about before you can actually do it intuitively, all right? Just again, like learning the language. You learn the words, you learn the flow, you listen to how people speak, and then you can do it on your own. You're fluent, right? So to sum it up, the visual weight can be measured in different ways. You can measure it by saturation, color, brightness, contrast, sharpness. In other words, by the way we perceive importance of elements in the image, because eye is going to be drawn to specific elements, like elements of saturation and color, which is why these humans are colorful, because these are the only colorful, warm, you know, these elements here, right? The only colorful elements in the image, and they're going to frame the entire ship. That was the whole point of it. So for example, if I didn't place this light in here, there would be nothing pulling up here, you know, towards the ceiling. But because the light is in here, I get this amazing framing of this vessel inside of this, you know, this composition. So for me, the visual weight also creates flow, because you're gonna flow from one anchor to another. And if you create a kind of like a fluid, you know, connection between them, and you are able to place these visual weight anchors in a way that the eye is gonna be flowing through the image, you're gonna get stuck in it, that's perfect. Because remember, the longer you want to, it's like with watching YouTube videos, okay? The reason why YouTube is promoting videos which were watched longer, which means someone spent longer time watching them, and they pique their interest over, for example, likes and views, it's because that's what's important, you know? The longer your eyes stay in the image, the longer the author is able to capture someone circling in your image, the more impactful the image is, okay? If you look at something and you don't get pulled in, there is no hook, right? And there is no really nice flow that makes sense and makes you like kind of like start dreaming when you're watching, when you're observing the image, this is not a really good image, okay? Now let me give you an example from photography. When I'm shooting nudes, when I'm shooting body art, I'm not thinking about naked bodies, naked women, naked parts. I don't see that. I see shapes. I see shapes, shadows, highlights, dance of lines. That's what I'm seeing. So I'm building an image and composing an image with literally shadows and highlights. Nothing else exists. And that's what I brought from calligraphy, because you got only black and white. You need to create a dynamism, you need to create a story, and the fight of dragons, right, and phoenixes and all that with lines. You have nothing else at your disposition. This is the only thing you need to compose: a white sheet of paper with black lines, okay? That's how you sell the energy. That's how you sell the power of calligraphy. And that's what you can do with images when you stop thinking about what you're actually using in that image. So stop thinking about, I'm placing a spaceship, I'm placing a human, I'm placing a barrel. It doesn't matter. So try not to think in terms of what object it is, rather than start thinking of, okay, what's the importance in terms of visual weight that this contributes to an image, and where should I place it? And can I offset it with something else? Will it make sense in this case? Is it going to be too heavy on the right side? Maybe it's going to be too heavy on the middle. Do you see what I mean? So the way you think about composition needs to change. Try to reprogram your brain to thinking in terms of visuals, colors, brightness, sharpness, not in terms of objects that are, specifically in your image.